Welcome to the Magic World. Welcome to the Magic World Championship Top 4, live from PAX West at the historic Paramount Theater. This is your first semifinal match. Introducing first, the number 4 seed from Tokyo, Japan, Shota Yasooka. His opponent, entering as the number 1 seed from Roanoke, Virginia in the United States, Brian Braun-Duin.
And we see our players just seated here for this, our very first semi-final here at the World Championships in PAX Seattle. Brian Braun-Duin came in as number 1 seed. Ian Duke, tell us a little bit about his journey to get here.
So Brian actually went undefeated in Constructed, went 7-0-1 throughout both the standard and modern rounds of this tournament here. So he is coming in with a lot of confidence and in great shape.
And of course, his opponent, Shota Yasooka, he's been here before, Ian. He managed to make it through to the very finals of the first of these World Championships of this format, where you have the smaller field. Both of these players, just excellent players, and we're going to get a chance to see a fantastic match here. Now, both of these players are on variations of a Bant Collected Company deck, but Ian, take us through the differences between the two, what we might expect.
So Brian Braun-Duin's deck is what we're calling Bant Humans. It is similar to the traditional Collected Company decks, but it's leaning a little bit heavier on human synergies, human cards that work together with each other, the most notable of which is Thalia's Lieutenant, which puts +1/+1 counters on all the other humans. On the other side of the matchup is Shota Yasooka. He's much more close to the traditional Bant Company list, but has a couple of twists on it himself. He's actually playing the full 4 copies of Jace Vryn's Prodigy. We see it there in his hand, as well as trimming down on copies of cards like Selfless Spirit and Spell Queller.
And even though Brian Braun-Duin starting out on a mulligan, it looks like he's got a lot of the kind of key cards that he's going to be looking for over the course of this matchup. He's already got a Collected Company to fire off. Lamholt Pacifist on its own, not able to attack, but as soon as he gets a higher power creature, it will be able to swing in. And Reflector Mage on that first Jace, actually stranding quite a few cards in Shota Yasooka's hand.
Indeed, that is the case, Tim. And the character of this matchup, I think, is that Brian is going to have the edge here in the pre-sideboarded game. He wants to come off with a fast start here. His humans allow him to get on board faster, to kind of dominate the ground. So we're going to want to see him being the aggressor and coming out and putting pressure on Shota here. Shota's deck is filled with creatures that give him a little bit more value, incremental value, as the game goes on. And so if he is able to stall things out, I think we'll see the game kind of shifting more towards Shota's favor as the game goes long.
Well, it looks like the early stages of this game are very much a Reflector Mage game of ping pong. Each player casting the 2/3, returning a creature to their opponent's hand, and then saying, well, you're going to have to find a different creature to cast next turn. In this case, finally Jace getting back on the board alongside a Selfless Spirit. Now, Selfless Spirit in this matchup, in some matchups, being able to give your creatures indestructibility a very, very big play. But right here, how important is it simply just to have a flyer?
Flyers are very, very important in these Bant Company semi-mirror matches here, Tim. Cards like Selfless Spirit and Spell Queller and even Archangel Abyssin, which neither player has in their main deck, but Shota has in his sideboard. Those are going to be major, major players just kind of sailing over these congested board states and getting through for unblockable damage.
And I guess it's worth pointing out that neither of these decks are necessarily going to present too many individual creatures that are gigantic. That's not really the character of how this matchup tends to go. It's more about going wide, putting lots of creatures onto the battlefield. And here we see a Collected Company, the first one of our match, sticking into play both a Lamholt Pacifist and a new card from Eldritch Moon. There you see it, Thalia Heretic Cathar. Now, Thalia, she makes it so that your opponent's creatures are coming into play tapped. Also the lands, but only the non-basic lands. How big an issue is that going to be for Shota?
It can be a very big issue in general with these three-color decks. There can be some mana stumbles to begin with, and having some lands enter the battlefield tapped can definitely exacerbate that. That said, Shota does have a fair number of basics in his deck. I believe the count is 10. So if he sequences well and he's aware of the possibility of Thalia, then he can, hopefully keep his mana running pretty smoothly.
And I guess that if we're saying that Brian Braun-Duin does need to be on a beatdown plan, though, the fact that he's been able to get Thalia down before there are too many creatures in play for Yasooka, pretty important because it means that at least it will mean that there aren't too many blockers.
Indeed, that is the case, and Reflector Mage comes down, sending that Thalia back to BBD's hand. Reflector Mage does enter tapped, though. The Thalia ability still applies to it, and this is going to open the window for BBD to crash in for some more damage here.
Yeah, Yasooka already at 14 life, and this swing will take him down just a little further. Lamholt Pacifist not really playing particularly well thus far, hasn't been able to get stuck into the red zone, cannot attack unless BBD has a creature with power 4 or greater, and right now that's not really a possibility, but one Thalia's Lieutenant could turn that all around. So a second Lamholt Pacifist, and there is the Lieutenant. Now what that does, it puts a +1/+1 counter on each other human that BBD controls, that being all of his other creatures. Okay. And now the Lamholt Pacifist, it doesn't even need to look for another creature. It itself is a 4-power creature, and that enough to get stuck in. Yeah,
Thalia's Lieutenant, really the key card for Brian Braun-Duin. It's what he built his deck around. He's made some concessions playing some slightly less efficient creatures in the name of having these humans that can interact with each other and sort of pump each other up. And indeed, we see that Thalia's Lieutenant adding a tremendous amount of pressure to BBD's side of the board, crashing in there for a whole bunch of damage. I believe that attack did knock down Shota down to 4 life. That attack for 10.
Shota now really needs to have a bit of a think about exactly what he wants to do here. In the Bant Company deck, not necessarily fantastic at blocking. It has plenty of creatures to work with, but those creatures not huge in size. And here is Nissa. She's going to find a forest for Shota Yasooka. All of the basic lands in Shota Yasooka's deck are Guru basics, one of the rather elegant set of basics that were made quite a while ago now, and something that Shota has been proudly showing to all the other competitors in this World Championship.
So now Shota taking a defensive posture here. BBD does have the larger creatures. He is much ahead on life total here, but really notably for Shota is the presence of that Selfless Spirit. That's going to mean if BBD were to make a huge attack here and just send in all his creatures, that Shota could make very favorable blocks potentially, even lining up a double block or two, and then using that Selfless Spirit to protect the rest of his creatures. That being said, with Shota being so low on life total, he may not have a lot of wiggle room to determine how his creatures block. He may not be able to set up double blocks there for fear of letting creatures slip through. And we do see in Brian Braun-Duin's hand a copy of Dromoka's Command, which is going to be something that gives him a lot of flexibility here in combat to set up a big attack.
Thalia comes back. That means an extra +1/+1 counter for Thalia's Lieutenant. Thalia's team very much getting together and working to get this first game against Shota, and we're going to see plenty of blocks here from Yasooka because almost all of those creatures are going to be able to pose a real threat to his life total, given that he's now on just 4 life.
That's right. With the exception of the Thalia's Lieutenant, which has 2 power, all of BBD's creatures have at least 3 power, and that, combined with the presence of Dromoka's Command, means that if any of those 3 power creatures go unblocked, that will spell the end for Shota Yasooka. So Shota need to be very careful about how he blocks here, and we may see him take a risk to try to pick off a creature, but if he does, it's not going to work out well for him.
Both of these players will have had plenty of time to look through the deck list of their opponent. They will have a sense of exactly how much they need to worry about assorted spells. Some of the Collected Company decks do go down on Dromoka's Command, but Brian Braun-Duin a full 4 copies in his list, so it has to be something that is being at least considered here by Yasooka.
So we do see Yasooka lining up 5 individual blocks there, trying to use the Selfless Spirit.
Put a counter on this, and this was this.
So what has happened here is Shota has declared his blocks and sacrificed Selfless Spirit to give his team indestructible. In response to that, Brian has cast Dromoka's command, adding a counter to a creature and setting up another fight, taking out Jace. That all happened before the indestructible effect resolved from the Selfless Spirit, and that's really going to put the crunch on Shota's board. He's going to have to come up with something big very soon.
It does not look like Shota's deck is helping him out in finding that big play. He's been in this position plenty before, though. Yasooka, certainly a veteran of the game, knows exactly what he's doing, and in this case, simply plays his 7th land, transforms Nissa, finds another land. He really did need that to be a big spell. But in this top 4, these rounds are untimed. There's no reason for him to concede prematurely. He can simply force Brian Braun-Duin to actually finish this game off.
Shota, I think there, was looking for a Collected Company off of his Nissa there. And the loss of the additional blocker from Nissa, combined with the fact that he didn't pick anything up, is going to leave Brian Braun-Duin's board state dominant.
And at the end of our first game, we will have, of course, the whole of this match for you soon enough. But first, these messages.
Whether riding the bus or waiting for the World Championship Finals to begin, Magic Duels is a great way to hone your skills and try new strategies. Featuring hundreds of earnable cards from Magic's latest sets and virtually unlimited AI and online opponents, start playing Magic Duels free today on iPhone, iPad, Xbox One, and Steam. You're invited to play with the new cards from Kaladesh early. Pre-release events are happening near you on September 24th and 25th. Contact your favorite game store and secure your spot today.
Hello and welcome back to this, our first World Championship semi-final. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined with Ian Duke, and, well, we've already had our first pre-sideboard game. With these best-of-5 matches, we will have a couple of games, and there we can see the trophies that are being played for. The finalist, and behind it, the World Champion trophy with that Planeswalker flame in the center of it. Around the base of that main World Championship trophy does list off all of the previous World Champions, and it's a pretty storied list of players, and one I'm sure that each of these guys would be very, very happy to add their name to.
Indeed, Tim. Magic, a game with a long tournament history. You know, almost 20 years here of Pro Tours. And this being our world champion for the year, it is capping off a year worth of awesome high-level play.
And you just get to see a little bit in the background there of quite how spectacularly the theatre that this is all being held in looks. Very much decked out in the guise of Kaladesh, if you will. Both of these players will have had a chance to check that out over the course of the weekend. And we really hope that any of you that are in the Seattle area or the PAX area have had a chance to see some of what Kaladesh has going on. Before Kaladesh comes, though, we are going to have our world champion. And these players drawing their opening hands for game 2. There we get a chance to see what Brian is working with. A couple of lands. The fact that he only has white mana here, not necessarily too much of a worry, because plenty of white creatures there, including Knight of the White Orchid, which on the draw is all the better because it can potentially find a 3rd land.
That's right, Tim. BBD looking to be starting off here with a very kind of traditional white weenie focused draw here. He has a lot of humans. He's curving out, even has that 1-drop in the form of Thraben Inspector into Thalia's Lieutenant. So just an absolutely fantastic opening here for BBD.
Selfless Spirit, the only play for Shota here thus far. He's going to be just checking out his hand, seeing if he can figure out what to do against this, which is more or less the most beat down of starts that the Bant Human decks can produce.
And I do want to emphasize, Tim, these pre-sideboarded games are crucial for BBD. He himself believes that the matchup does get worse for him after sideboard. He did pick up that first game on a mulligan to 6, so just a huge pickup for BBD. And things looking good for both players here, starting out in game 2.
Now, Brian, I believe, has not drawn a land yet, but he's not going to be too concerned about that. Knight of the White Orchid will mean that he doesn't fall too far behind on mana if he so chooses. And with a couple of clues after that Declaration in Stone, he can also have an extra way of drawing out of things. Declaration in Stone, a 2-of in Shota Yasooka's deck, and potentially one that's going to be quite good in this matchup. There is the potential for boards to get kind of busy, and at that point being able to deal with more than one creature with just a single spell, obviously an attractive quality. Knight of the White Orchid is able to fetch for a Plains, but it does not need to be just a basic Plains. There we see a Canopy Vista being fetched out by Brian, and that means that his colors getting a little bit fixed here. Certainly will help him as he transitions into the mid and late game. We do see that there is a Tamiyo Field Researcher in his hand, and at some point that one could provide a huge source of additional value, either tapping down Shota's creatures or drawing Brian cards. And speaking of drawing cards and indeed clues, Tireless Tracker, just a very powerful addition to Shota Yasooka's side of the board. He immediately plays a land, immediately gets a clue, and with each clue that he sacrifices, not only will he be drawing cards, he'll be making that Tireless Tracker bigger. And that actually one of the humans that we see in both of these decks. It's relatively easy for the Bant Collected Company deck to transition into being humans, because actually some of the best creatures in these Bant colors are humans anyway.
And with clues piling up on both sides of the battlefield here, this looks like a game where the players are unlikely to run out of cards, which means that a determining factor may be tempo. And by that I mean getting an onboard presence and putting pressure on the opponent is what these players want to be doing here. As things stand right now, BBD dominating the ground, getting in there for 4 points of damage with 3-bit Inspector and Knight of the White Orchid. Meanwhile, Shota chipping away with Selfless Spirit. It is Shota that has the kind of the first opportunity to shore up the board here, as he does add a counter to Tireless Tracker and has the opportunity to play a second creature here, or third creature here as well.
Yeah, it was a big turn for Brian last turn. He cracked a clue and only found an Evolving Wilds, basically setting him back in terms of actually deploying more threats to the board, and he gets to just look on as a Sylvan Advocate comes down for Shota Yasooka. It's only a 2-3 for now, but with Vigilance it will soon be a lot bigger threat than that. 5 lands in play already for Shota. Once we get up to 6, it becomes a 4-5, and I believe that there is a Lumbering Falls already in play for Shota Yasooka, which will also get pumped by the Advocate.
Indeed, that Sylvan Advocate, a huge threat for Shota Yasooka here, really could potentially shore up the ground for him. That said, Tim, we do see Island being fetched up for BBD. That gives him access to all 3 of his colors, as well as access to that Tamiyo Field Researcher in his hand. So we may not see him play it just yet, but that is going to be a tool that he can use to tap down that Sylvan Advocate and allow his creatures to attack past.
There's also Dromoka's command in hand. That not so good once Shota Yasooka's creatures start growing. He kicks things off with a Reflector Mage here and a Thalia's Lieutenant. This a very powerful play, clearing a path and indeed letting him swing in for a whopping 6 damage. Shota Yasooka here down to just 6 life, and given that we know that there's a Planeswalker coming, this could spell bad news for the Japanese former Player of the Year.
Absolutely. Things looking fantastic here now for BBD. We talked about tempo being important, the way this game is playing out, and what a tempo turn for BBD. That Reflector Mage sending back the Sylvan Advocate, unwinding Shota's previous turn, and adding a ton more power to his board with Thalia's Lieutenant. I think with that kind of pressure being backed up by Tamiyo, Shota is going to be in a lot of trouble here. Let's see what he can come up with.
That Sylvan Advocate will not be able to come back down this turn, as Reflector Mage kind of puts it on ice for a little while. So the options available to Yasooka here are Jace Vryn's Prodigy and Selfless Spirit. He has the mana for both, but he also has a clue that he could potentially crack. Let's see which one he goes with. You see the players sat here in our theatre. They have headphones on. The reason for that, they're not just kicking back, listening to some music. We have got players. We have got the crowd able to watch live. We want to make sure that the players do not hear our commentary, so they are kind of in their own little bubble. They can hear each other, they can hear the judges, but they are very much just focused on the game. And it's all going on. Shota Yasooka puts the shields up and has to hope that it's going to be good enough.
So this could be the turn where we see BBD play that Tamiyo, tapping down a couple of creatures. Doesn't look like BBD has actual lethal damage this turn, but he's going to put Shota in such a pinch with this Tamiyo that I think we'll be seeing these next couple turns be the end of the game in favor of BBD here. But we'll see what he decides to go with. Selfless Spirit gives Shota a little bit of flexibility in terms of combat, but I think that Tamio might just prove to be too much for him.
And Tamio, a card that wasn't necessarily a part of main decks for Bant Collected Company until comparatively recently. We saw it doing good work at the Pro Tour, and I think that with an anticipated field featuring quite a bit of Bant Collected Company, that part of the reason that Tamio has been called up from the bench, if you will, from the sideboard to become a main deck inclusion for Brian Braun-Duin. And there she is, immediately coming down with 4 loyalty.
I'm gonna tap these two. Those two. Tapping everything.
So Brian Braun-Duin choosing to tap down the 2 non-Selfless Spirit creatures. Why do you think that may be, Ian?
So at least one of the Selfless Spirits is going to have to be sacrificed this turn anyway. And since Tamio taps down the creatures lasting until until Shota's following turn, tapping down the Jace and the Tireless Tracker ensures that this attack is essentially taking 3 creatures out of the equation all at once. And that's going to set BBD up for the maximum possible damage on his following turn.
And Shota, a lot of lands in hand, not a huge amount else. There is that Sylvan Advocate, which got bounced by Reflector Mage a few turns ago. It may be that Shota decides that it's time to knock on his deck and lean on that clue and hope for something big.
Best possible draw for Shota here would be Collected Company. Picks up a Spell Queller instead. Fundamentally, at this point, any creature that Shota has is just a blocker. So he's really looking for a card that could provide multiple blockers at once in the form of Collected Company. Selfless Spirit comes in and takes out that Tamio. Better to remove the Tamio's ability to tap 2 creatures than to leave the Selfless Spirit back on defense and simply get tapped anyway. But as things stand, it looks like if BBD is bold enough to attack with everything here, we will see him taking this second game.
Definitely a temptation to play a human pre-combat here, simply to pump Thalia's Lieutenant. But you see him holding it in the air there. He knows that there's the potential for a Spell Queller, and Shota Yasooka says, fine, why not? Let it come into play. And that is the second game. So Brian Braun-Duin, as we go into these sideboarded games, is just in fantastic shape. You can hear a little patter of applause from the crowd, respectful of these players' concentration, not kind of whooping and hollering just yet, though I would not be at all surprised if at the conclusion of this match we have quite the riot of applause. Players in the theatre getting a chance to enjoy this just as you guys do at home. But we're going to be moving on to sideboarding now, and let's hear from the players themselves about exactly how that's going to go.
All right, Brian, tell me what the plan is here with this sideboard after Game 2 in the semifinals.
Well, I have 2 different plans, actually. One is on the play and one's on the draw. On the play, I'm actually not going to sideboard that much. I'm just bringing in 2 Tragic Arrogance and cutting 2 Knight of the White Orchid, which is just a much better card on the draw. And it may seem weird to bring in Tragic on the play in the Bant Mirror, but it's just a card that you can really play to at any point in the game, even on the play, and it's just a really powerful effect. So I'm hoping that maybe he doesn't put me on bringing it in when I'm on the play, and I can maybe get him with it. And even if he does put me on it, it's something he has to play around. On the draw, I'm sideboarding way differently. I'm bringing in Knight that I have in the sideboard and 2 Nissas, and I'm cutting Thalia's just because Thalia is a really powerful effect when you're on the play and you can maybe tempo them out, but on the draw it's really hard to do that, especially through like Reflector Mage or Collected Company into Reflector Mage or whatever. So I'm not going to be trying to Thalia him on the draw. I'm just going to be trying to play more of a grindier game with Tragic Arrogance and win that way.
All right, good games the rest of the way here in the semifinals. All right, Shota Yasooka, what is your sideboard plan once you go to your sideboard for this tournament?
呪文トライやその超歩兵、ジェイスなどのちょっと遅いカードを抜いて、無視の霊魂やアバシンなど強力なカードと入れ替えます。
He would like to remove Auditize Command, Spell Queller, Dusk Watch Recruiter and those cards, and then he wants to get to Avacyn, so he will be adding 2 Avacyns, Selfless Spirit, Doromoka's Command, and Thalia.
All right, thank you very much, and good games the rest of the way here in the semifinals.
Yes, thank you.
Very interesting stuff from the players there. I think it's a valuable lesson that we're learning from BBD here about sideboarding, the fact that he does have such different plans whether or not he's on the play or on the draw.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point, Tim, especially with the presence of Knight of the White Orchid in his deck. That is a card that picks up a lot of value on the draw. It is going to change how he configures his deck between the play and the draw here. And what's really interesting to me after watching the sideboard videos is even though this is a semi-mirror match and that they're both playing similar archetypes, each player has a very different plan in these sideboarded games. We saw BBD talking about Tragic Arrogance as his key card. If the board state does clog up, he's going to use that card to break that parity and leave himself with a more powerful board. On the other side of this matchup, Shota Yasooka putting a lot of emphasis on flying creatures, bringing in Archangel Avacyn and more Selfless Spirits in order to put pressure on BBD in the air. So the character of this matchup, again, is going to be very much BBD trying to win on the ground. If the board stalls out, he'll use Tragic Arrogance to break that up. Meanwhile, Shota trying to defend on the ground and get through with flying attackers.
And of course, Brian Braun-Duin has done exactly what he needed to in these first 2 games. He's got himself a bit of a buffer in terms of what he needs to do now that we're on to sideboarding. If it works out that his plan doesn't work out in this first game, there's still time. This is best of 5. He's already 2 up. He just needs 1 more match, whereas Shota Yasooka, he's going to have to get 3 on the bounce.
That's absolutely true. Things looking very good for BBD as the match stands. However, I think both players have acknowledged that things are getting better for Shota post-sideboard here. So those first 2 games that BBD won, those were the games that he was sort of expected to win, or at least a slight favorite in, and those were the games that he needed to win because things are going to get worse for him as we go into games 3 through 5 here.
Yeah, so even though he's currently ahead, the sweat is very real for BBD. He is going to have to hope that things work out his way in these next, well, potentially 3 games. I've seen Brian probably taking more mulligans in this tournament than just about anyone. The fact that he's in this top 4 means that, well, either he's been drawing pretty well in those mulligans or that actually he's been making some very well-advised choices about when to ship back a mediocre 7 for a good 6.
Yeah, no doubt he's been making great decisions all throughout this tournament as evidenced by his undefeated constructed record. I also think the fact that he is playing sort of a lower to the ground version of the Bant Company deck, putting more emphasis on the early game, is a big part of why he's able to recover from those mulligans.
But it looks like this is a hand with both lands and spells. Thalia's Lieutenant, we know, is one of the more high-impact cards in his deck. Dromoka's Command will be a way of dealing with at least one of the early threats, and it looks like we have a mulligan for Shota Yasooka, not what the Japanese former Player of the Year wanted to see. We know that he was potentially looking to take home the trophy that he was not able to pick up back in the very first of these small hall World Championship events. He had a fantastic event in the very first one in 2012, but ultimately was felled by his countryman, Yuya Watanabe, in spite of having dominated the Swiss portions of the tournament. And he referred to taking the trophy home because that's where he kind of feels like it should be. And right now, well, he's in a rough spot.
He is indeed. He's certainly got his work cut out for him if he wants to take that trophy back home to Japan. Being in this spot here, down 2-0 in a best of 5, no room to give for Shota Yasooka, and he is taking a mulligan here on the play. Now, mulligans often can be more punishing when you're on the play because you're simply seeing fewer cards than your opponent, and when you're seeing fewer cards, seeing even one fewer card than that is even more of a penalty. But it does look like perhaps a pretty decent 6 here for Shota. I see lands, I see spells, I see a Sylvan Advocate.
I mean, he has kept his scry to the bottom. The one concern I have with this hand is he has 4 green spells and no green mana sources in hand. So he will very much be leaning on the top of his deck here if he's going to get on the board early. Meanwhile, Brian Braun-Duin, well, he's got an Evolving Wild. He knows he's going to have the color of mana that he wants on the very next turn.
And Shota, we see, still lacking green mana. Did take a little bit of a gamble keeping that hand, but it is really painful to go below 6 cards, and with that scry that you do get when you mulligan, taking a peek, putting a card on the bottom, getting hopefully for him ever closer to his green mana, but he is going to need to find it soon.
We can see Shota Yasooka's lifetime stats there. Made it into the Hall of Fame last year, and 49 Pro Tours. He'll be racking up the 50th as and when we head across to Hawaii for the very next Pro Tour Kaladesh. We see here, though, that while Shota Yasooka a little bit constricted on mana, Brian Braun-Duin right now, he's got everything working for him. He even gets to have Lamholt Pacifist naturally transform because there are no plays yet from Shota Yasooka. While there was that Canopy Vista, it came into play tapped, so he just has to sit back and watch as 4 points of damage come through, and there's follow-up plays from Brian Braun-Duin there in Thalia's Lieutenant, though notably it doesn't get to put a counter on the flip side of Lamholt Pacifist, because once that human shaman werewolf transforms, well, it's just a werewolf.
So Shota finally getting onto the board here on this, his turn 4. He does have Tireless Tracker into Evolving Wilds. Evolving Wilds, a nice pickup there. It does give him 2 clues here in 1 turn. The question is he going to have time to start sacrificing those clues to recover from that mulligan he took, or is BBD just going to put too much pressure on him too quickly?
Well, I spy a Collected Company in hand for Brian Braun-Duin, and he's got the 4 mana to be able to cast it. This exactly the kind of card that you're looking for if you're trying to provide additional pressure to an opponent that's already kind of on the ropes. That Tireless Tracker, it may well hold off Thalia's Lieutenant, but on the other side of things, we still have werewolves to worry about, and they are a big worry for Shota Yasooka right now.
And BBD with a pretty smooth and fluid draw here. He did have 2-drop into a turn 3 play, and now he has option for Collected Company here on turn 4.
Yeah, we do also have another copy of Thalia's Lieutenant in BBD's hand. Those things get very out of hand when you have multiples of them in play. They're getting so many extra triggers. You're now pumping the first one, and the second one is also going to get pumped as and when more humans come along. Dramoka's Command here, enough to mean that the one creature on Shota Yasooka's side of the board, not long for this world, and a big hit coming in from Brian Braun-Duin here, and the Collected Company that he's going to be able to cast next turn could be formidable. A couple of humans in play, and it could be lights out for Shota Yasooka.
Indeed, Tim. That was an attack there for 8 already. Shota Yasooka already kind of back against the wall here, facing down 3 creatures to none. Does not have time to pop those clues. Does have a Reflector Mage, perhaps, to buy a little bit of time, but it may not be enough here. He's already in such a defensive stance that he's going to have to start chump blocking with creatures pretty soon. And BBD with that Collected Company in hand, as well as 2 Thalia's Lieutenants. That's a lot of potential for a huge burst of damage here coming at instant speed.
Now, Shota Yasooka has passed with 4 mana up. We can see that he has Collected Company in hand, and that is going to be what he's going to be leaning on here in order to potentially stay in this game. We know that there's 25 creatures in his deck pre-sideboarding. With the changes that he's made, he's brought Archangel Avacyn in and taken a couple of smaller creatures out. He may find that there's the potential to not hit 2 creatures here on Collected Company. And if
so
that's
here
the
it comes
case,
here, Tim. This is going to be
over.
tremendous. It's coming down to these probably pair of Collected Companies we'll see here. Shota is casting Collected Company before block, so depending on what he gets, he will have the option to line up some blocks here against BBD. That said, BBD could fire off a Collected Company of his own to pump up those Thalia's Lieutenants.
Only 1 creature of Collected Company. It's a Jace. I mean, ultimately, all the creatures kind of the same here in terms of what...
And that is a Reflector Mage in that 6 for BBD. That's going to fire off and put that Jace back in Shota's hand, and that will be the game and the match for BBD here. He is advancing into the finals here of our World Championship.
1, 2, 3, easy does it, Brian Braun-Duin. We will be seeing more of him later on today in the finals of this, our World Championship at PAX here in Seattle. And you can see a little sigh of relief for him there. He knew that this was a matchup that he had every potential to win, but speaking to him about just in general how his match with Collected Company was, he sort of said, well, it's all right. There's a lot of play there. I feel like, I mean, I do have the early games pre-sideboarding locked up, and it was worked out exactly as he called it. We're going to see Brian Braun-Duin in the finals, but we're going to head things back across to the news desk because a lot more magic here today.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Top Deck here at the Paramount Theatre. Were spells, wow. Louis Scott Vargas, how about that?
Yeah, that was one of those matches you get with the Bant Company where one player just runs away with the game, and we kind of saw that happen 3 times.
Now, how many times could we play that matchup out between those 2 people before we got another 3-0 BBD blowout like that?
It would be difficult, especially since Company is such a good deck at coming from behind too. Collected Company into Reflector Mage. When you're behind, that does a very good job of stabilizing.
I'm sure Marcio Carvalho off stage and Oliver too are very busy thinking about their matchup, thinking about staying hydrated, staying calm, chatting with people on social media. How happy will they be that Shota's out the door?
Shota, I mean, it's hard to look at each player's resumes and not conclude that Shota was the most decorated player coming into this top four. And having played against Shota many times, including multiple times this tournament, I can say he's definitely at the top of his game.
This is a very unusual tournament. It's an incredibly, well, it is a unique atmosphere. We've got hundreds of people in the building, which the players can't hear. They're in this enormous stage, but in a tiny table at the front. They're in headsets. How different is this experience, and how much impact is the environment that we're in here potentially playing on Sunday?
It's pretty crazy. You're on this stage down there, and you're playing 10 feet away from people sitting in these chairs, and having been now on both sides of it, that 10 feet is like, a mile.
Yep.
It's just a different atmosphere, a different world when you're playing on this stage, on the stage of a gigantic theater, versus watching these players play, even if you're just, physically only 10 feet away.
Well, we can hear now from the winner of that first semi-final. Didn't take him long to get there. Here is your 3-0 winner from semi-final 1, Brian Braun-Duin. Here, you're going to have to put that away for a moment, Luis, because down there they've got a little microphone issue. So sorry about that. We'll get back down to the floor to BBD in just a minute. So 3-0 there. We know we're going to talk in depth about our second semi-final in a few minutes, which is the Turbo Emrakul against Bant Company. Now, BBD's beaten a Bant Company already, but would he like another, or would he prefer to see Turbo Emrakul, do you think?
It's pretty close. Most matchups in Standard are pretty close, but one of the reasons that I like playing the human versions of Bant, which is what BBD is playing, is that Thalia's Lieutenant is just an incredibly good card in the mirror. So having access to Thalia's Lieutenant makes you feel pretty good about playing against other decks playing Reflector Mages and other decks playing Duskwatch Recruiters. Okay, well, we can head back down to the two Brians. Batteries now fully charged. Let's see what's going on.
Once more with feeling, and this time with sound, Brian Braun-Duin. That's not how the match played out for you when you were testing it last night. Tell us about play testing overnight.
Yeah, last night I tested with Seth, and he was beating me like 80% of games or more. Just didn't feel like that great of a matchup, but I feel like from playing it out that I learned a lot about how I'm supposed to play, and I was able to kind of use some of that in playing this match. Playing around Declaration in Stone and not trading off creatures when I can, just trying to build a giant board, play as aggressively as possible because the late game favored Shota. So I was pretty happy with how these games played out, obviously, and it kind of went all according to plan.
And then, you talked a little bit about your sideboarding plan with us. How did that actually pan out when you sideboarded for this match?
Well, it actually worked out. Actually, it just didn't really happen. We only played one sideboarded game and didn't really draw any of my sideboard cards. I just drew the Thalia's Lieutenants that are probably my best cards. So didn't really come up, but I was pretty happy with the plan anyway.
All right, so Thalia's Lieutenant, obviously a huge card for you, and really what makes your deck seem so much different than the other Bant Company decks. How many dice should we be looking for when we know you're winning a match?
Probably like 6, 7.
People talk about card advantage all the time, dice advantage, very huge in his matchups. Now, talk to me for a second about playing in this tournament. I mean, we see you in the jersey, we have these gorgeous lights, this incredible stage. What has this experience playing in this tournament been like for you?
It's just been completely unbelievable. Like, this has been something I've wanted to play in for a really long time, and it's just been amazing. And I've had so much fun playing in this tournament. Even though it's supposed to be stressful, I've just been like having a blast and playing as well as I can, and things have just gone really well for me.
All right, well, one match to go here for Brian Braun-Duin. He is a World Championship finalist right now. We still have a whole other semifinal to deal with here, and then we'll try to find him an opponent. In the meanwhile, going to send it back up to the news desk with Luis and Rich.
Thanks very much to BDM. There you see them there on the floor. He will go and have a hearty lunch because he is into the World Championship final. Now, there's been so much going on here at PAX. It's been an amazing experience. Tomorrow, we've got the Inventors Spell Slinging Showdown. Still tons of great stuff. Blogger Live is coming your way tomorrow as well. Plus a closing program you will not want to miss at 5 p.m. Pacific. There are still some big surprises coming your way from the world of Kaladesh, Magic's newest and brightest set. Outside the Paramount Theatre, though, there's been something pretty extraordinary going on too, because not just the Paramount Theatre, but the street outside has been converted into Kaladesh on Sea, if you will. So why don't we take a look? We're going to give you a little tour. We'll see in a few minutes, but here comes the street fair.
The magic of Kaladesh has spilled out here from the Paramount Theater and onto the streets of Seattle. I'm Nathan Holt, and I'm here to take you on a tour of the Inventors Street Fair. So come, follow me. First up, we have this beautiful cosplayers lounge, and I think there are some magic celebrities lurking about too. Is there?
I find you, you don't find me.
Oh, that's right.
Man, I forgot how tall you were.
They all say that. Jimmy, what have you been doing this week?
I've been doing a bunch of magic stuff. I hosted the opening ceremony, and this is the first time I've got to experience the street fair, which is so cool.
A multiplayer hero of mine, Jimmy Wong. Listen to his podcast, Command Zone. Love it. Thanks so much, Jimmy. Yeah. All right. So this is the Thopter Assembly Station. Thopters being an important theme in Kaladesh. Looks like one's already been completed for me. I don't know if this is how Thopters move, but I'm just going to decide that they move like this. Is this hard? Like, how long does it take to make a Thopter?
About 10 minutes, right? So.
And are you good at it, or are you below average? Like, would it take me 35 minutes?
I don't know. I think I'm pretty below average right now.
I probably would be too. Arts and crafts was never my specialty, but hey, what's this doggy's name?
Jace the Heart Sculptor.
Sculpting hearts, melting minds with cuteness. I love it. Hope you guys are having fun. Maybe I'll take one of these little Thopter packets. You can find them out here at the street fair. Fold them up, give them to a kid, keep it yourself, throw it across the room at your teacher during math class, whatever you want. We're looking at some real fire. What's going on at this station here?
Oh yeah, we're Pratt Fine Arts Center, and we brought some demos from our art labs out today. So we have our blacksmith forge, our glass bead making, and then our small metals jewelry studio here.
What are these gentlemen banging on? What, are they making swords or weapons that I should be concerned about?
No, we're making nice little roses and bottle openers.
Useful tools here on the planet Earth. I recognize this person. Ms. Liz Lamfera, I'm good. Tell me what we're looking at here.
We are looking at a larger-than-life stag.
She's referring, of course, to the preview card here from Kaladesh, Larger Than Life, in which this large stag elk-esque creature is represented on a sorcery that gives a creature +4/+4 and trample, and I guess something else that we will find out on Monday what this card exactly does. Describe what's going on with this elk's fashion sense.
This is a place of beauty, and so we wanted to take the metal crafting to a new level, and I think we did at 16 feet tall. But we couldn't have done this without our friends at Puppet Kitchen.
So you helped to create this giant stag. Yeah. There's a niche audience for elk fans within the Magic universe that calls every single elk Elmer. Tell me, what was it like to actually build Elmer here?
It was incredible. The art that we were given from Magic to try and recreate and make that come to real life was a real joy.
Well, it looks beautiful to me. Sir, I salute you. You are larger than life. That's very intimidating. All right, we're here at Kaladesh's finest tattoo parlor. I'm gonna pop in and see what they can offer me. I'm a little scared, but you're not using a needle today, are you?
There is a needle involved, but it will not touch your skin.
Okay, still vaguely scary, but I'll roll with it. Why not? How many of these tattoos have you made today?
Oh gosh, I'm doing probably about 300 an hour.
300 every hour.
That's right.
Wow, that's beautiful.
They are, just like that.
Not bad. It looks very Mardu, red, black, and white. I think I might summon some goblins and attack. Yeah, thanks very much.
You're very welcome.
All right, this is the Learn to Play tent with some really beautiful and comfortable looking cushions. I'm gonna have a seat here, and hello. If it isn't my friend Mark Purvis, a brand director here for Magic the Gathering, and you've been teaching people how to play Magic, presumably?
That's right. Anyone who's drawn in by the fair, who's heard of Magic but maybe hasn't played before, can come in here and they can get a free sample deck. And we're also directing them to the Lady Planeswalker Society. They're in the Paramount Theater, and they're teaching people how to play as well.
I already know how to play Magic, but every time I see somebody play for the first time, it feels like I'm playing for the first time too. You can't help but recall the wonder of sort of discovering the crazy artwork and all the fun creatures and whatnot. So anyway, thank you for your time. We're going to move on here. We're at the Inventors Fair, and these are some prize-winning inventions. There's, some classic Pyromancer goggles with some special editions. If you want to see a movie in 3D, I'm guessing that's what that's for. Some sort of giant club with a trigger. It might be a water gun. It might actually just be a good old-fashioned beaten stick for beating down your opponent when they're at like 3 or 4 life. All right, we'll keep moving on here. We've got another great preview card here. If you want to make your creatures really big, this is a guy you can summon. Look, he's a giant artifact creature with a tree located in his chest. I can't imagine something better to defeat your opponent with. Look, just come on down to this street fair. There's a truck called Cheese Wizards. Who wouldn't buy food from a truck called Cheese Wizards? Downtown Seattle, the Paramount Theater, and we'll see you at the Kaladesh Inventors Street Fair.
Great stuff. All right, thanks so much to our features team who've been out and about all the way around PAX this weekend. Been joined by Brian David Marshall and by Luis Scott Vargas. As usual, I don't have enough initials to be up here, but there we are. Welcome along, guys. We'll get into our second semi-final in just a little bit. The players are at lunch, so our best guess round about 1:30 for live coverage of semi-final 2. But don't go away. We've got cards to show you and to talk about from Kaladesh, and then, as I say, we'll get into our second semi-final preview. So, Luis, I'm going to give you the first look at this suite of 5 lands that we've got, and maybe suite is the operative term. Let's take a look at Blooming Marsh, Botanical Sanctum, Concealed Courtyard, Inspiring Vantage, and my favorite, Spire Bluff Canal. What's going on with these?
This is an exciting cycle of lands. We saw the allied color version of this back in Scars of Mirrodin, and those lands, they seem to play to this day in Modern. Blackcleave Cliffs is a staple in Jund, for example, and when these lands come into Standard, I expect to see them all over the place. They just feel great. You just have them in your opening hand, you play them on turn 1, 2, or 3, and they just come into play untapped. That's awesome.
Now, Brian David Marshall, I just want to make sure you have seen that there are 5 of these, not just Botanical Sanctum.
I've only seen 2, actually. I've only seen the Marsh and the Botanical Sanctum. That's it.
Those would be the 2.
Just the things that let me place a DC on turn 3.
All right. Now, Luis, obviously they are mechanically all identical. They are a cycle, as we call it. But are there any differences between them in the way that we're likely to see them used?
Yeah, the big difference is that some color pairs care more about having lands untapped early, and some really want land number 6 to be untapped. So I can imagine that a control deck, for example, might not want, their 6th land to come into play untapped. Like, what if you're trying to cast Emrakul on turn 7? I mean, she's a huge threat. Some decks may be a little wary, whereas if every card in your deck costs 1, 2, or 3 mana, these lands are fantastic.
So Inspiring Vantage is a card that the Boros decks are really excited to get.
I would expect Inspiring Vantage to be one of the best ones, given the kind of cards we typically see in Boros decks.
Okay, so that's our cycle of lands. Next up, I want to show you Girapor Orrery. Got that out correctly. It's 4 mana artifact. It's rare. Each player, that's everyone, can play an additional land on each of his or her turns at the beginning of each player's upkeep. If that player has no cards in hand, that player draws 3 cards. There's lots of potentially bad things going on here, BD.
I'm looking forward to seeing Luis play this in a draft deck on his stream.
Well, It's certainly the kind of card I would love to play with. It also, just the possibilities with this card are kind of endless because it fuels itself, right? You know, you play additional lands to get cards out of your hand, you draw more cards, you play more lands, you play big things. But you also have cards like Noose Constrictor that all of a sudden, you know, you provide the combo and you kind of go off.
Okay, that seems pretty filthy. Now,
I also liked what one of the players said during the Kaladesh with the pros, when they talked about the idea like, oh, Reflector Mage is suddenly a very spicy card to play with this because you can actually strand a card in your opponent's hand for a turn, so they can't actually get under the Ori to draw 3 cards.
For you.
Yeah, that's really sweet.
It's just finally a card that makes Reflector Mage good.
It's
what
we've been waiting
for.
These two are terrible. Let's move on. I'm going to bring you another card now. It's called Panharmonicon. It's also 4 cost. It's also an artifact. It's also rare. Let's see what this does. If an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. I think a lot of people are not going to initially understand that. BDM, you lost the toss. Do you want to have a go first?
I mean, this seems like a really sweet card. I guess a triggered ability as opposed to an activated ability is really what you're going to be looking for here. And I needed a trigger warning before we started talking about this card.
Is when, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like when a creature dies, when this becomes untapped.
So
when
Solemn Simulacrum would get you 2 lands when it comes into play.
Right, there's 2 things going on here. One is that a card like Reflector Mage, for example, would double trigger. The other is if it causes any of your things to trigger, it triggers multiple times. So self-contained cards like Reflector Mage work twice, but if you had a card that said, whenever you play a creature, give this creature a +1/+1, that would also trigger twice. So it looks at everything.
Okay. Now, the next thing I want to show you, the most frequently asked question at PAX this year has been, live fast, die young. Is that 1 card or 2? Here's your definitive answer. Let's show you live fast. Here it comes. 2 and a black, it's a sorcery, it's common. You draw 2 cards, lose 2 life, and get 2 energy. Luis, the first 2 parts of that we've seen many times before in Magic. The third, of course, is unique to Kaladesh.
Well, I'm a fan of the first 2 parts. That is already clear. And energy is a pretty cool new mechanic too. There's a ton of different cards that let you spend energy. This card does not intrinsically let you spend energy. So if you compare this card to like Read the Bones and have no energy cards in your deck, yeah, maybe you're not getting the best deal, but that's just not how it's going to work in Kaladesh. You're going to play this card and it's going to fuel other cards which may give you an out to spend energy.
It's going to be just great stuff. BDM, why don't you take a look for us at Die Young, the second half of this little storyline, if you like. So here is Die Young, 1 and a black for a sorcery. Again, common. Choose target creature. You get 2 energy. Then you may pay any amount of energy because you've got some lying around. The creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each energy paid this way. So it's straightforwardly a -2/-2 for 2, or it could be a lot more than that.
This card's really sweet. Plays really well with the first card. You're digging for answers. You find something, now you get to go -2/-2 to something. You have 4 actually, right? Like you can actually go on turn 5, have 4 energy. You dug for 2 cards with Live Fast. Now you'd make some things die young, and you can just move some counters around and do some pretty nasty things.
Yeah, you can even pick off a 1 toughness creature and end up with an extra energy floating around for something else. My only complaint about these 2 is Live Fast costs 3 and Die Young costs 2. So if you were to curve them out, you would Die Young then Live Fast? It's okay. I think you want to cast them in the proper order, so you'll end up in the right place there.
Okay, I'll need a moment to think about that. But while I do, why don't we take a look at Demon of Dark Schemes, or Demon of Dark Schemes, as they say. 3 black, black, black. It's a 5/5 flying demon. When it enters the battlefield, all other creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. And whenever another creature dies, brackets, if they had 2 toughness or less, you get an energy. There's more. 2 and a black, pay 1, 2, 3, 4 energy, put target creature card from a graveyard, that's any graveyard, onto the battlefield under your control tapped. Luis, which of the 17 elements of this card do you like the most?
I like the fact that this card is just amazingly powerful. I mean, that part is cool, but more than that, I like that all the pieces do kind of harmonize. You're talking about a bunch of different abilities, right? You've got the fact that it's 5/5 flyer. You've got the fact that it gives everything -2/-2. It also, takes the energy from everything that dies, and then it lets you use that with its last ability. All those just mesh so well. This card, I think, is going to play really well. I mean, it is very powerful, but it's also just going to play well.
Is it just a limited card as far as you can tell? No, this is, even though it's triple
this
black.
looks like an amazing constructed card.
Oh, wow.
It is context dependent. All cards are.
Right.
But assuming there's a decent amount of, 2 toughness creatures, this card's going to be incredible.
Can't wait to see that. We've got one more to show you, then we're going to head down the stretch towards semi-final 2. Here is, oh, isn't it lovely? It's Territorial Gorger. It's a gremlin. It's 2/2 and it's rare. It tramples. 2/2 trampler? What else are you going to say? Whenever you get whenever you get one or more energy, Territorial Gorger gets +2/+2 until end of turn.
So the important thing here is, though, it only gets to be a 4/4, right?
Right. You get, if you played, let's say, the demon, and you gain 7 energy at the exact same time. Well, I guess the demon actually triggers separately. If you get a bunch of energy at once, it's 1 per batch of energy.
Right.
So,
but if you
live fast and die young, you'll get 2 total triggers.
Right.
You won't get 4.
And the Territorial Gorger will be enormous.
Well, it'll still be great. I mean, this card does in fact take your energy. This card will let you turn energy cards into pump spells, and already it's a 4-mana 2/2 trample that easily can attack for 4 or 6 a turn.
There are some amazing cards already seen on Kaladesh. They're coming thick and fast from our community ambassadors, from out on the street fair, from Down with Kaladesh with the pros. If you missed that this morning, check it out on our YouTube stream. And also you can check out all the cards that have come out of PAX so far and in the future, www.kaladesh.com. But now it's time to turn our attention back to the main stage here at the Paramount Theatre. Time for semi-final 2. And if they're going to be faster than the first one, they're going to have to get their skates on, because that was blistering stuff. Why don't we take a look at our bracket for you, show you where we've been and what is still to come. So we began our morning with semi-final 1. It was Bant Humans, Brian Braun-Duin against Shota Yasooka's Bant Company. Both players, curiously, Luis, in the pregame were talking about they felt that they were kind of underdogs, which is, somebody was wrong. In the event, BBD mauled Shota.
Yeah, it was not particularly close. Shota did not cast a lot of collected companies, which is kind of the key to the matchup. And yeah, BBD just was able to get ahead and stay ahead. Thalia's Lieutenant played a key part of that role, enabling multiple Lambholt pacifists to attack on some of the turns.
Is that one of the appeals of the Bant Humans deck, that it can actually win with just its early game of playing creatures and, getting the Lieutenant and just getting all those counters out on the board?
Yeah, the Bant Humans deck plays cards that are kind of individually weaker than the normal Bant Company lists, but in concert, they're very, very good. Thalia's Lieutenant is really the card that makes the deck shine.
All right, so Brian Braun-Duin awaits the winner of semi-final 2. Who will it be? Let's get into the matchup. We begin with the 2015-16 Draft Master. Here is the resume of Marcio Carvalho. He utterly dominated the last 6 months of Pro Tour action in the limited rounds. 6-0, 6-0. 5-0 here at the World Championship in Limited, before finally JC Tao unlocked the key to finally winning a match of Magic against Marcio Carvalho in draft. Just an astonishing run, over $100,000 in lifetime earnings. Let's take a look at his path to the top 4. And BDM, just a reminder for everyone, rounds 1 to 3 and 8 to 10, those are the limited rounds, and then constructed 4 through 7 was standard, 11 through 14 modern.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about the fact that he was the draft master, but 3-1 in standard here, and no shame in losing to anybody at this tournament, but Mike Sigrist, a pretty formidable opponent.
So in the last round, he chose to play. He was already locked into the top 4, Luis, but he chose to play against Oliver 2. The format was modern, but Oliver 2 did win, and won in pretty fantastically entertaining fashion. Is there any positive for Oliver or negative for Marcio coming out of that match? Or is that, because it's in a different format and yesterday, is that just not relevant at all to this?
It's not particularly relevant to how things line up today. Marcio had every reason to play. You get a pro point per win, higher seeding in the top 4, so he definitely should have played. The fact that he lost and still made it in, that just means that Marcio is in great position to start with.
Right. So let's take a look at the deck that he is bringing to battle with here at the World Championship. He is playing a Bant Company list. This will not surprise a lot of you because this has been around standard throughout this standard season. Luis, walk us through it. What is Marcio trying to do with this deck?
So the core of this deck is Collected Company. It's built around that card incredibly. It's got a ton of creatures that cost 3 or less, and it kind of at its base is a tempo deck. You're playing cards like Noose Constrictor and Sylvan Advocate to get some early damage in, Spell Queller and Tireless Tracker as your like 3 drops that are pretty powerful. And the deck is good at getting ahead and staying ahead, and it's also good with cards like Reflector Mage at kind of coming back even when it's behind. One of the interesting parts about this particular version is what Marcio chose to use in his non-creature slots, as it were. You don't get very many slots for cards that don't get hit off Collected Company. You usually want 24 to 26 creatures that cost 3 or less.
Right.
And Marcio has like Archangel Avacyn, 2 Elder Deep Fiends. Like, he's got some big high end, and those cards are very impactful in the matchup he's about to play.
And he's on the bottom end of the number of creatures you want to play that you can hit with Collected Company. He only has 24, and we've seen players really pushing it like 3 and 4 more.
That's essentially the minimum.
Yeah.
Once you get lower than 24, your Collected Company starts to take a serious hit.
Well, let's take a look at Collected Company. It is one of the key cards in this matchup for Marcio Carvalho. There you see it. And Luis, I've heard it said repeatedly this weekend, one of the best ways to beat Collected Company decks is when Collected Company doesn't do what Collected Company does.
Yeah, when you whiff on Company, when you either hit 0 or 1 creatures, then this card is, it's nothing special. You paid 4 mana for a card that costs 2 or 3 mana.
We watched Shota Yasooka in the first semifinal cast a Collected Company and hit just a Jace Vryn's Prodigy, which had no interest in getting involved in a fight.
Definitely not, and that's one of the ways to lose with the Company deck, even when you cast Company, is the fact that you're spinning the wheel a little bit.
All right, let's take a look at another card that does work with Collected Company. This is Sylvan Advocate. Here it comes, coming up on your screen. Sylvan Advocate, a mainstay of standard, comes out of Oath of the Gatewatch, Luis.
Sylvan Advocate's amazing in this deck because it's a card that you can play for 2 mana that, this deck needs creatures that cost 2 and 3, but the disadvantage of 2 mana creatures is in the late game they don't do much. Well, Sylvan Advocate transforms. All of a sudden now it's a 4/5. It also pumps up your Lumbering Falls, which is a really relevant interaction.
So Marcio Carvalho is gearing up for semi-final 2, but yesterday he took the time to come in and talk with our own Brian David Marshall.
I'm here with Draft Master Marcio Carvalho. Draft was how you got here to this World Championship, and you lived up to your name. You went 3-0 on day 1 in draft. You went 2-1 on day 2. Talk to me about what has made this Innistrad draft format such a successful format for you.
Well, I think this draft format is really good for me because the bombs don't really matter. Like, curving out is what's important. So in this draft, if bombs don't matter, it gets really easy to win if you know what you're doing.
Well, we want to know.
Yeah, in the first draft, I drafted Black Red. I first picked the Symbol Alpha, the 5/5 rare, above Brazen Wolves. I don't even know if that's right because I really like curving out, but I did it. Then second pick, I had Brazen Wolf, so I gone for that. And then the cards just keep coming. I had like 8th pick Olivia's Dragoon, so I drafted like a black-red curvy out deck with some 4 to 5 removals, and I 3-0'd that one.
Now, we got to watch you draft on day 2, and it was a little bit more complicated than just curving out, right? Like, that draft was required a little bit more navigation.
Yeah, because I opened Sombrerol's tag, and then Mike Sigris passed me the Oldrich guy, the red-green. But I think red-green is like really bad in this format because the curve, like again, the curve isn't good. You have a lot of problems with fire. So at the moment when I picked Oldrich, I already was thinking of playing like bull green with red. If bull was open, then I third picked Dragander, and things kept going my way. I think I finished the draft with 4 or 5 rares or more. Yeah, and
you could have taken the Silver Fur Partisan. I think had gotten up to like 6 or 7.
7,
right?
I think. Yeah, but I didn't have any tricks for him, so he wasn't that good. I ended up losing to GC Tau in round 3, so I couldn't finish 18-0. That was sad for me. But
that was sad. He only went 17-1 in Innistrad drafts over the course of 2 Pro Tours and a World Championship.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Now, let's talk a little bit about your Modern deck that you finished the day out. What did you bring for the Modern rounds?
I brought Abzan, a list made from Willie Adel, because he knows his Abzan list. I faced Shota in the first round. I lost to him. He was playing Company. I think, well, it was a hard match. Then I played Lucas Cape Shifts, and I drew really well, so I won. Then I drew with Brian. And in the last round, I played Oliver too for like a pro point for me, but for him it was like top 4. The game was intense, and like game 3, I really thought I was gonna get it, but that explosive like killed me. And then he had the escape sheet, so he deserved it.
Okay, so now you're going to be playing standard, though, of course, in the top 4. Tell us about your standard deck and how that format went for you.
Standard, I went 3-1, losing to Mike Sigrist, playing the Emerge deck, Temur Emerge. I lost 1 to him. I think Bant is really good. It's the best deck in the format. Like everyone's playing that, so I didn't know how to beat it, so I played it. That's the thing. And Thiago had a good list. He was crushing on Magic Online on every league, like 5-0, 5-0, 4-1. Of course, there's a lot of skill in Thiago, so his scores are a little bit jammed, but I thought it was really good, so I go for it.
Okay, so you talk about Thiago, someone who you've teamed with, who's from Brazil. You have support all around the globe. Tell us who's going to be rooting for you and who's cheering for you. Who's on Team Marcio this weekend?
Well, I think everyone from Portugal, of course. They are awesome. They're always cheering. It's insane. I thank them for that. Spain too, and Brazil mainly. Yeah, all those 3 like really push for me, and I appreciate that, guys.
I can tell you that when they were doing the top 4 announcement, you had Willie Adel and Thiago Saporito sitting in a small little box up in the balcony just by themselves, and they're just like waiting for your name. They're kind of like, okay.
Yeah, Willie is insane. He's done a lot for me, like really a lot. I can't even thank him that much, I think. So winning this, it would be great, and I would thank him.
You said he actually seemed happier than you were.
Yeah. Because if you know Will, you know he just wants his friends to do well. It's like, now in this time of Magic for him, it's like more about the other guys, not him as much, because he has a son now and other things. So.
All right, Marcio, good games the rest of the way here at the Magic the Gathering World Championship.
Thank you.
So that's Marcio Carvalho, but it takes 2 to tango. Good luck, Portugal. Good luck, Brazil. Good luck, Spain. We know you're rooting for him. On the other side of the table, it's Oliver Chu. Let's take a look at him, the 18-year-old, only the 2015-16 constructed master, Platinum Pro, 20,000 lifetime earnings. Well, that's all this season because that's all he has in the bank. So this is by far the least experienced of our final 4, but boy, he has not buckled under pressure at all. Let's move on to take a look at how he reached the top 4 BDM.
Yeah, he did not have a great record in draft, but fortunately he's the constructed master. Went 6-1-1. Said I probably should have gone 7-1, but 6-1-1, and had a perfect record in Modern down the stretch with that incredible match against Marcio Carvalho. Just incredible poise, this incredible game of brinksmanship with the obstinate Bailoff and the Liliana. It was fantastic. And I talked to him about it. It's like, how you're 18. It's hard to keep a straight face. You want to jump out of your seat with that obstinate Bailoff, but he waited until Marcio had committed to upping the Liliana. It was a great play to watch.
It really was. Great stuff by Oliver too. Here's the deck that he is battling with, and this is Turbo Emrakul. So, Luis, not only some explanation of the deck, but you've got some insight into some testing.
I do. So, this deck is, in fact, Turbo Emrakul. There's 3 copies of Emrakul, the Promised End. All the deck is trying to do is use cards like Vessel of Nascency, Grapple at the Past, Gather the Pack, put a ton of cards in your graveyard, all the different types for Emrakul, and then put Kozilek's Return in your graveyard as well, which lets you cast Emrakul or Elder Deep Fiend, wipe everything out with Kozilek's Return, take control of your opponent's turn, and just win from there. The funny part about all this is Oliver recently joined our Pro Tour testing team, and we have a Facebook group. This is a team forum. Last night, after the top 4 was announced, a bunch of the guys from the team started testing the matchup. And so this morning I woke up and Corey Burkhardt had just posted these different sideboard plans. Here's how all the matchup went. Here's game 1, here's game 2. Oliver's going to use that as he sees fit, but his teammates were just at home. None of them are even here in Seattle testing his matchup against Marcio.
Must be nice.
It's a pretty spectacular season that he goes from someone who last year was presumably home watching his idol Owen Turnewald play in the World Championship, and now here he is about to embark on the biggest stage of his career.
Fantastic stuff. Let's look at a couple of key cards in the deck for Oliver too. How about we begin with the big one, Emrakul, the Promised End, Luis?
Emrakul is, I think, the most powerful card in Standard right now. She has multiple different decks built around her, and when you cast her, I mean, the end does usually come. There are not that many games where your opponent survives an Emrakul.
But there's just enough to keep it interesting. That's what's so beautiful about that
You
card.
can definitely beat an Emrakul, it just doesn't happen very often, and it's kind of on your opponent, whoever casts the Emrakul, to make all the decisions. Well, I would say right, but maybe wrong, depending on which side of the table you're on.
Sometimes a Tameo is involved in beating an Emrakul.
That's true. Tameo, I think, flavorfully does defeat Emrakul, and that's all I was trying to do, was advance the storyline.
Advance the storyline, yes, and we're grateful to you. That's lovely. Why don't we take a look at Kozilek's Return? That's the next one. They see it, the mythic rare instant, so much going on with that card, but I can tell you the players are gearing up for the second semi-final, and we haven't had a chance to hear directly from Oliver too. He's a super impressive young man, and he had a chat yesterday with our own Brian David Marshall.
All right, I'm here with Constructed Master Oliver Tew. Oliver, you are heading into the top 4 of the Magic the Gathering World Championship. It's not a dream. You've actually gone to the Pro Tour, done well at 4 straight Pro Tours, won an invite to Worlds, and now here you are in the top 4 of Worlds. What has this year been like for you?
This year has been actually insane. Like, I just went into my first Pro Tour ever, not expecting much, but the wins just kept on coming, and I kept on improving, and it all added up to this.
Now, how do you improve over the course of a year at a Pro Tour? What were the things you did to get yourself here?
Just learn from the best players in the world. Teaming up with team face-to-face games is great, helps me improve a lot. I still have a lot to learn, but I'm improving along the way. Just watching people play helps me a lot. Playing myself, just like knowing where I'm making mistakes and stuff, helps a lot. I don't know, just a combination of things.
You've had a couple of really exciting games this weekend, seeming to both come at the end of days. You had that crazy match with Steve Rubin at the end of day 1. What the heck happened there?
I just made so many mistakes in that match. It's just a game I never want to relive.
Okay, well,
it was awful, but I might not be here if that didn't happen, so I don't know. It is what it is.
But then can you go have a match like that? I think the difference sometimes for the players who have an opportunity to play at this level, and if you feel like you've made a mistake like that, or you feel like you misplayed a game, to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and learn from that experience, as opposed to kind of like holding your head. And
yeah, that's definitely a thing I've learned over these past couple of tournaments is, you make mistakes, it's Magic, it's an incredibly hard game, but you just have to know not to get tilted off for like the rest of the tournament, and you just have to dust it off and just try your best to play well in the next match.
How did the formats go for you? I know, how did draft go for you overall this weekend? You had 6 rounds of draft.
Yeah, draft I 3-3'd, which for most players of this caliber is not great, but for me, I'm happy with it. I'm more of a constructed player. And
constructed master.
Yeah, and I'll take a 3-3 in draft against the best players in the world. But Standard went moderately well. I went 2-1-1. Should have been 3-1 if I played tighter. I was expecting a better record with my Standard deck. I was really happy with it, but hopefully I could improve upon that tomorrow. And Modern 4-0, no complaints there. I made a couple mistakes, but overall I played well, and my deck choice worked out very well. Played against a bunch of good matchups.
Talk about that crazy last game against Marcio Carvalho. You can't have ever imagined playing a more tension-filled game for such high stakes. You lose that game, you're not in the top 4. You win the game, here you are talking right now.
Yeah, I was just hoping they didn't have Collective Brutality, because I knew that was like the only card you could have in that situation. Because even if I didn't draw the land for the Scape Shift, I had many other outs to just kill him on that spot, and if I just bricked off, I still would have been in a pretty good position. So I was just crossing my fingers, hoping he didn't have Collective Brutality.
Okay, so it's just one card you really felt like you had a sweat there.
Yeah, basically.
So now you've talked about looking at some of the best players in the game and learning from them. Who are the players who are going to be following you tomorrow along the rail? Who are the players who are going to be supporting you here and maybe at home?
Well, at home, my family is going to be supporting me, I'm sure of that. In terms of players, all my former face-to-face teammates, all the players I've grew up with, all of them from my local game store and from back home. Just a ton of people that I owe a lot to.
Is there anybody who's sitting back at that store right now going, you know, I used to beat that kid at Friday Night Magic. Maybe I should be playing at the World Championship?
Yeah, many. I did my fair share of losing in FNMs. When you're 12 years old playing an FNM, you're going to lose a lot. So.
Yeah, he's gotten a lot better since then. Obviously, here he is on the brink of playing in the top 4 of the World Championship. I'll reach you good games the rest of the way here in Seattle.
Thank you.
All right, Luis, give me a winner. One word.
Oliver.
BDM.
Oliver.
Let's find out. It's time for semi-final 2 of the Magic the Gathering World Championship 2016.